Coming up this fall, in addition to all the candidate elections, the voters will be asked to weigh in on as many as 11 ballot questions. We're going to look at two today. We'll look at virtually all of them before November. We're joined in Studio 3 to talk about the rent control question and the income tax question by the Executive Director of the Center for State Policy Analysis at Tufts University's Tisch College. Evan Horowitz is out with a number of reports on a lot of issues, including these. Evan, good to see you. How are you?
Well, it's good to be here. I mean, I hate that we have to talk about 12 ballot questions over the next
12, as many as 12?
It's 12, yeah, because there's also an effort to repeal a recent law, and that counts as
the gun law? Is
that
the gun law?
Exactly.
Yeah, we'll get to that too. Okay, good to see you.
God, you've got to be in the voting booth for like a half an hour.
Well, that's an issue. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but go ahead.
Okay, so let's start by talking about this tax cut proposal. What is this about, and what is it going to mean?
So the current state income tax rate is 5%. This would lower it to 4% over 3 years. And as you might imagine, that would cost the state a lot of money. We estimate about $5 billion in losses by that full phase-in third year. And that's about 10% of total revenues at that point. So, if you lost 10% of your paycheck, that's a lot of money. Now, that money goes somewhere. It goes to households. The sort of typical household, kind of middle-class household, will have an additional maybe $1,250 or so to spend thanks to the tax cut.
But there is no typical household. So, I mean, I understand that's academically. So I'm guessing that low-income households get a small savings and people who are loaded get a huge savings.
I mean,
is that fair?
It depends how you think about it. In percentage terms, everybody gets to save about 1% of their income.
I meant actual cash.
But in actual cash, yes, the highest earners get about 30 times as many dollars as a middle-class household, and they get a lot more than lower class.
Yeah, you got it right here in one. I don't know if it was your report or someplace else. People making over $1 million will get 37 grand back. People making between 75 and 200,000 will get 1,267, as you just said.
So, has there been polling on this question, by the way? Do you know?
Internal polling for sure. And my understanding is it polls relatively favorably, but it's early days.
And so is this like a trickle down? Is that the argument of the proponents?
Yeah, the argument of the proponents. Well, they make a couple of arguments, and I don't know how much credence to give some of them by repeating them. But part of it is, yes, it'll stimulate the economy. Now, we didn't find that. We didn't find big impacts on the economy. And we looked.
Trickle down? We've been hearing about that since 1980, haven't we?
Yeah.
And it's never worked since 1980,
that's the thing
has
about
it?
this argument that tax cuts are going to stimulate the economy. At one point, it was a theoretical argument. You could kind of talk about it. But we've been doing this now for decades. We know what the dynamic impacts are. We know there is some pass-through to the real economy, but it's small, especially for a tax cut of this size. The other is they kind of claim that the state won't lose that much money, and I don't understand that at all.
I read that too. I don't understand. It's a simple math proposition, is it not? It's 1/5 of the revenue, I assume, as it grows, of the income tax revenue.
Well, so that's sort of the basic one. You could then say, except it will stimulate the economy so much that people will earn so much more. But we actually tried that out. We're like, well, let's give them the full impact of an economic balance, and it's still $5 billion.
Who are the proponents?
So it's kind of traditional right-leaning business groups who are behind it, anti-tax groups. I mean, Jim knows these groups going back.
Well, no, actually, I know one of the two primary ones, the High Tech Council, which was the organization that was primarily working with Barbara Anderson a century ago. She was the head of Citizens for Limited Taxation. And then Howard Foley was the head of it, and his number two, I think, Chris Anderson, is now head of the thing. And the Pioneer Institute, I mean, in all fairness to the High Tech Council, which is not fair at all, their position has always been smaller government is better regardless of the consequences, which is ironic in light of the fact, in my opinion, and I used to say this decades ago when we'd be up against each other in ballot debates, is those businesses are dependent upon the things that those tax dollars buy, a high-quality education system, decent roads and bridges, and that sort of thing. And that,
do we have decent roads and bridges? I hadn't
No,
noticed.
but we have a millionaire's tax that it goes exclusively by constitution to those two pots,
I think one of the advantages they have in arguing for the tax cut is it's very hard to say, well, if this tax cut goes through, the state won't be able to fund roads and bridges, won't be able to fund schools. We don't know exactly where the money's going to come from. It's going to come from somewhere. We will have less money to spend on things, and there's no way that you can make up for a deficit of this size just by being more efficient. It's too big. 10% is too big.
Well, that somebody in this room fought a ballot question not unlike this in 1990 and won. Who would that be, Marjorie?
Oh, that would certainly be you, Jim.
Thank you very much. And we had the same dilemma because we couldn't say what exactly was going to be cut, and their argument was the old tired waste and inefficiency. It's that's and the reality was that voters saw through that and defeated 60-40. But this is going to be huge, and Healy has spoken out about it so far, but it doesn't have much of a profile, even though it's only March.
It's hard for these things to break through. There are so many of them.
That's my next one. Before Marjorie asks one more question about the state tax thing, do you bother, and I don't mean this in a pejorative way, looking at the issue, if there are 11 or potentially 12 questions on the ballot? The reason we say potentially is everybody's got to collect another round of signatures. It's a very small round, so in all likelihood they will. There'll be some legal challenges, but they're going to be at least double digits in all likelihood. What's the impact on voters comprehending what they're voting on when there are that many questions, a la California in the old days?
So I don't know of research on this. I can only say this. One of the things we do at my center is we analyze all the ballot questions. And it is going to take us 6 to 8 months to get our heads around all of these, right? And this is my job.
That's all you're doing.
Poor
This is
Evan.
all I do.
You have
right?
my sympathy.
So there is no chance for a voter, even if they read all my guides, which they should do when these things come out, to get their heads around all these things. Some of them are very technical questions. There's one about changing how automatic income tax refunds happen. We're working on that now. It's a hyper-technical question. This is not a question for voters. I think it is more or less impossible for even very informed voters, we're a state of smart people, for even smart people to be prepared to weigh in on this many policy questions at the ballot.
Well, let me just say, by the way, the place to go if you want to see these analyses, which are very thorough. I don't agree with all of them, but they're thorough. And no, they're real. No, it's hugely important that people get your analysis. Google Tufts Center for State Policy Analysis. And
actually, I was talking to an AI the other day, and it recommended one of my reports to me. So you could also ask the AI. Apparently, they know about them.
One last thing. It seems to me this is a tough time politically to be opting for a tax cut because you're already hearing, because of the federal cuts to Massachusetts, about people getting screwed totally on Medicaid.
Can I respond before Evan does? I would argue it's the opposite, that the environment is such that what they're going to say is your gas prices, who knows what's going to be in November, but let's say it was today. Gas prices went up $1. You're losing all your money in the stock market. So one of the ways to offset those costs, and again, we don't know what they'll be in November, is to do this. Don't you think? Or what do you think?
I mean, I worry about this, like that the affordability framing is
That's
going
what I
to be
meant,
the
yeah.
dominant framing, whereas, what Marjorie's pointing out is, of course, we have all these federal cuts. We have to backfill some of these things, and instead we're going to have less money even to do the core things that we're doing.
And one last thing, I always thought people
You said
get
one
really
last thing twice.
ticked off about is their federal taxes rather than their state taxes.
Well, it's a much bigger take, obviously.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, when I look at what I get upset about, it's not Massachusetts, it's the federal
No,
government.
but
and
you hear
that's
what he
why.
said? The typical family, $1,250, that's a lot of money. Again, low and moderate income people aren't going to save $1,250, but the typical family does. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, and that is modest. So think about 1% of your income. Having said that, a 1% state tax cut is just wildly overwhelmed by the size of your total tax bill. If you're a middle class family, you're paying like maybe 22% in income taxes to the feds.
Yeah.
Plus 5% or plus 4% is not a huge difference to your tax bill. And that's really what we're talking about, the kind of overall size. And that's why the economic impacts are small. Because what matters is not what percentage of the state cut, what percentage of your total tax bill.
Exactly
and a 1% cut to a tax bill of 26% or something, it's not that big.
Okay, so rent control in a form, different, very different, as we discussed ad nauseum here, from what Mayor Wu's home rule petition was like. Hers was a local option with different numbers. This is a statewide mandate. Here's Mayor Wu with us in February and Governor Healy with us last fall, both saying, I thought it was after last fall, maybe I'm wrong. In any case, saying how they're going to vote on this question.
If this is still on the ballot by this fall, I am a yes voting for it. It's not perfect, and it's not what the city of Boston put forward as a balanced proposal for our city, but I'm not going to let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
I'm a no because if you look at the studies, you effectively halt production. I will tell you that investors in housing have already pulled out of Massachusetts because they're concerned about rent control.
Okay, what did you find there, Evan Horowitz, about the rent control question?
We found it's bad.
That's
not
concise.
that the question as a whole, but we look specifically at the impact on cities and towns. And you might think, like, why does it have an impact on cities and towns? Well, one of the things that rent control does is it makes properties less valuable. And you know what cities and towns in Massachusetts rely on for basically all of their funding? Property taxes. So if it makes properties less valuable, the cities and towns are either going to get less money in property taxes, a lot less, sort of 8 to 10%, or 6 to 8% less right away, and maybe 10 to 20% less over time, or they're going to have to raise property tax rates. So it has a huge kind of pass-through impact on municipalities that I don't think people have fully kind of reckoned with.
You know, one of the things, though, that I think people are reckoning with is that they're renting dumps in Alston and Brighton for like $5,000 a month. And, you know, Jim did a little research before. What was it? The 2-bedroom apartment in Greater Boston or Boston, Cambridge, $3,000 to $4,500. So if you're a single mother with 2 kids, this is crazy. The rents are crazy. And the argument that they don't fix their apartments because they were fixing their apartments once they've read a rent control is the biggest bunch of baloney I've ever heard.
Oh, no, they won't fix their apartments. No, that's like a
No, she
No,
was
they're
even
not
without
fixing
rent
them. They're not
control.
fixing them now.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, my kids have lived in dump
Sure.
after dump after dump.
Well, I think a couple things to say here. One, there will be more dumps. So, like, yes, there are dumps now, but there'll be many more places that landlords just can't afford to fix. You're seeing it in New York, like just whole apartments, like people can't afford to fix. It makes no sense. Having said that, one thing that rent control reliably does is it lowers rents for controlled buildings. Like,
Right.
no one is saying this law will backfire in the sense that rents will go up. No, rents will go down. Like, if you're in a controlled building, your rent will be low. It's just that there are all of these kind of massive economic distortions and costs that are required to make that happen.
Well, you know, I lived in one of the 3 cities that had rent control before it was repealed in the 90s. Marjorie
too.
lived in
Yeah.
one of the 3s, and I can say, and I still live in the same neighborhood, in the same house actually. My neighborhood was a far more diverse, far better neighborhood, and I didn't find that the city was not doing what it was intended to do when it had rent control. So again, that's anecdotal. As opposed
you were in
to-
Cambridge?
Yeah, I was in Cambridge. Marjorie's in Brookline.
There's detailed information about Cambridge, and it was depressing property values and landlord investment by substantial amounts when it was in place through the 90s. That's, yeah.
Well, let me do one thing I think you touch on occasionally when we've talked in the past about other ballot question things. One of the solutions, which may not address your concerns around rent control, but would address one of mine, is the legislature should do its job for a change. For example, I mean, we asked Mayor Wu about this. I totally agree with her. It would have been far better if this was a local option situation. And if a duly elected mayor, despite what Evan Horowitz says, and I don't mean this facetiously, says, I'm elected, I think it's good for my community, they should be able to do it. That's not the way this thing is
Well,
drafted.
there's no despite what Evan Horowitz says. I mean, if voters in a town want to do this and understand the costs, then of
Exactly.
course they should be able to do
But
it.
they don't have that right here.
Correct.
It's a statewide
Yeah.
mandate.
And people in Brookline and Cambridge and what was the third place? Somerville, I think, that had rent control. What was the third town that had rent control? Those people all voted to
I think
keep
it was Somerville.
when
All
when
3
it went
did. The
down.
other
Yes.
348 cities and
But
towns
it's-
voted no.
But that's just like, go ahead, Marjorie.
I was just going to say one thing that sounded very strange to me, that property values for single-family homes are going to go down because there's this fear that homeowners in Massachusetts can retire to Florida, rent out their Bay State abodes now. Most of them that I know that are doing this are only doing it in the wintertime. They're coming
This is
back.
in the report you're reading.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and this is going to cause houses to become less valuable. I mean, how many people are renting out
okay,
their
so it's-
houses and going?
It's not that everyone's doing it. It's that it's an option for every house. Every time you sell a house, one of the people who might buy it from you is someone who might want to rent it out.
Right.
Under rent control, that person is not one of your potential buyers, right? And so it's just that it sort of shrinks the market shrinks demand for houses too. Now, the effect is not as big as it is for apartments, but we're not making this up. Like, this is what has happened in Cambridge. It happened in Minnesota. Housing prices go down, and part of the reason is this kind of optionality. One of the things you can do as a homeowner is rent out your house. Under rent control, you probably can still rent it out, but maybe not enough to cover your mortgage, not enough to.
So the idea
cover
is that
costs.
going to Florida for 6 months, coming back, throwing out the
No, like
renters.
maybe I go on sabbatical. You know, I get sabbatical and go to France for a year or something. Man, that would be great. And I want to rent out my house while I'm gone. Suddenly, I can't do that. That just makes my house less valuable.
Okay.
Not 50% less valuable, 5 or 6% less valuable in the market.
Are you going to do all 12 questions before this is over?
Yes.
And what was the thing I was going to... oh, and by the way, we will have debates, just so you know, if people are concerned about what Evan's conclusions are on any of the questions, we're going to have both sides invited for every single major ballot question before
Can I say,
you vote.
both sides hate me. It's not like
Well, that's really good to hear.
And it's going to take you 6 to 8 months to get through all this. You're going to really have a fun time. And
yeah, because there's no predicting. This is one reason we have had so much trouble raising money for these things. So where's the money come from for our reports? No, very few people will give us money for these reports. And the reason is they can't predict what we're going to say. We're just following the evidence and telling people what our read of the evidence. Like, are we perfect? No, but we are trying to get it right and follow the evidence. And this doesn't mean, we don't do on the one hand, on the other hand. We do say, like, this is what the evidence says. But it's hard to know in advance. And so we make enemies on all sides. And we're really just, we don't end up in the middle, but we are really trying to get it right.
Okay, I just want to end this session by saying, legislators, before you take your 5-month vacation, see what you can resolve so that voters have a modest number of issues to resolve come November.